All right, y'all, it's time to get into this full back wax. But before we begin, my name is Bethany, but you can call me Aunt B. Welcome. Before any wax, you're always going to cleanse the area. I have a pre-wax cleanser that I use and a pre-wax oil that I use as well. So that's what you're seeing me apply. First, I'm always going to apply oil before I wax, especially to an area that people can't moisturize themselves. Moisturized skin is going to handle a wax so much better. It's going to be a lot less painful for your client, and they're not going to have that post-wax irritation that a lot of people will feel because their skin is more moisturized. For my back waxes, I'm always going to start with a middle strip. Regardless of how much hair there is, I pretty much am always going to do the same techniques. It's kind of a habit. I'm basically on autopilot. But the middle strip is going to make it easier to do the side strips. Now, one thing about being a waxer, you are not going to have a perfect strip every single time. So if it's not perfect, just fix it. This strip is too thin and it's not wide enough. So I went back to grab more wax so I could make it better. If I were to try to pull this up, it would break on me, and that just makes it a hassle and more for me to clean up. It's also going to be more painful for your client because with those little pieces of wax, you have to get it up. You can't just leave wax on your client. So here I am just making it better, making the edges thicker, and then it's going to be a lot easier to come up all in one piece. Also, there's certain parts of my client's back that has more hair, so those parts of the strip have to be thicker. Now, I don't recommend picking up your wax strip with your stick. However, sometimes it's just something you need to do. If you're going to do that, do not flick. There's going to be wax at the end of your stick, so you're going to press it into the wax, since wax attracts wax, and then just pull up instead of using a flicking motion. So like I said, I'm always going to do the middle strips first. So you want to do the back strip towards the top and the back strip towards the bottom. I typically also do a middle one, but this client does not have that much hair towards the middle. Depending on the hair growth, you can decide which direction that you want to do them. You can see that the wax was still tacky when I went to go pull it, so it didn't necessarily pull right away. That's normal. That happens pretty often. That means the strip didn't dry quite as quickly, but that was just towards the lip where it was thicker. Now I'm going to go up and do the sides. I typically will lay a good 3 strips at a time, depending on the temperature of my wax and my client. This client books multiple services at a time, so it typically gives me a longer window of an appointment, so I don't have to rush. This client also usually sees me towards the end of the day where I have less wax in my pot, so that is going to make the wax a little bit different than it would be if I had more wax in the pot. There are so many variables when it comes to waxing. So with less wax in the pot, it's hotter, but it's going to dry quicker. So you can see throughout this wax, I'm pretty much only laying 1 or 2 strips at a time. I have used hard wax and soft wax on this client. I don't necessarily have a preference when it comes to back waxing, but this client actually says soft wax is more painful for them, so I do prefer to use the hard wax. However, you're pretty much going to do the same techniques down the middle and then on the sides, but you may do it differently with soft wax because you're going to lay a bunch of soft wax in one area and use that same strip to get all of it versus doing opposite ends with hard wax. When you're using hard wax, the key is going to be pressure, and that is what's going to help pick up those hairs regardless of how thick, thin, long, short they are, because the hard wax is basically going to like shrink wrap itself to the hair, and that's where you're going to get that good result. The wax that I'm using is from Derm Wax Naked Elite. I do have a code with them if you guys want to save. You do have to be a licensed esthetician or a cosmetologist, I believe, to purchase from them. I get the products from Spa Order. I love them because it's a subscription, so I never forget to order my wax. I believe I get my wax order like every 30 or 45 days. When you're a business owner, there's just a million different things to think about, so I love not having to worry about it. And they have other supplies too, so like sticks, gloves, barbicide side wipes, stuff like that. So I literally do not have to think about it. And I can order a lot less from Amazon because I'm trying to stop using them. Now, I'm still trying to figure out my camera setup. I did not get the lower back, but I had to be a little careful anyways because what's by your lower back? Your butt, and that is not YouTube appropriate, so I guess it's for the best. But hopefully my next back wax I can get the full thing on there. You pretty much get the idea though. You can see literally 95% of this client's back. It's so interesting to me when you get waxed at most like corporate or chain places, because on a back wax the shoulders aren't included, and that just blows my mind, because if you wax someone's back and you leave the shoulders unwaxed, it looks so funny. So to me, it's just like super greedy and a money grab to not include the shoulders, especially when someone is super hairy. It's more common for me to wax men for their back because their hair does typically grow a lot longer and thicker. And so it was always so interesting to me at previous jobs that I worked at when they didn't include shoulders. And I'm like, this looks so crazy. So for me, with my clients, I'm gonna include the shoulders. It just feels right. I also love the way that tattoos look after they get waxed and you apply that moisturizer. Since that dead skin is gone, when you moisturize, the skin just glows so much better. Now, I will say with this particular back wax, I was having a lot of difficulty picking up some of the shorter hairs. My client did confess that they haven't been exfoliating the way that they're supposed to be, or how much they usually do, and haven't been moisturizing. And so some of the hairs were covered with dead skin, which make them harder to pick up. So you'll see I'm doing a lot more like cleanup strips, which are typically strips in the opposite direction. But some of these I had to get tricky and do like completely different directions than I normally would. I will say, sometimes it gets hard if me and my client are having a really good conversation. I'll lose train of thought sometimes, like, what strip am I doing? What direction am I going? And that's one thing to working faster and more efficiently, is to plan your strips. Before you even go to the wax spot, you should already know what strips you're going to do next. And so once in a while, when we're just having the best conversation, I'm like, oh crap, what was I about to do? But because I've done so many waxes a million times before, I know what I'm going to do. So pretty much this whole back is done, but you can see I'm doing my cleanup strips now. So these are going to be in the opposite direction. We typically have multiple directions of hair growth on almost every area that gets waxed. You can visibly see where I still need to do some of the wax because of the different color of skin. I'm not going to point it out to you, maybe you guys can tell, but there's an area that's a little bit darker. So I still need to go over that area again to get that completely waxed. You can see this strip is still sticky, it doesn't want to come up, but that's just the edges, because the edges are thicker in order to pull it up evenly. And when it's thicker, it takes a little longer to dry, and so it was a little too sticky to pick up. But I absolutely love the way this wax spreads and glides. And one of my favorite things is that because it's clear, as it starts to dry, it gets more white, so you can tell when it gets ready to pick up. They do have a shimmer version as well, but I didn't feel like it worked as well. I don't know, once you start adding color, for some reason I do feel like the melting point is different and they start to work a little differently. But you can see this strip is already getting white, so you can see it's ready to pull. That was literally so perfect. No matter what, do your best to put pressure on the area that you just waxed. When you're working fast, sometimes you may forget or just like not apply as much pressure, but do your best. Your client will thank you. Those are the things that they remember, I swear. Just remember, you also don't want to go over the skin too many times. Even if you're using a sensitive skin wax or whatever, waxing is a form of exfoliation and you don't want to overdo it. You can really rub their skin raw. There's a rule of thumb, usually no more than 3 times with hard wax. So be careful and make sure you're paying attention to how many strips you've laid, especially with soft wax. when you're doing those cleanup strips, you might just kind of get, I don't want to say careless, but absent-minded. So keep that in mind. It is one reason why I use oil, because the skin is more, what's the word I'm looking for? Resilient, I guess, when you use that oil. And so you tend to be able to go over the skin a few more times. You can also reapply the oil, let it absorb, and go over it again. That's what I do with soft wax. You have to re-oil with soft wax, but with hard wax you don't. But I do recommend it if you need to go over the skin more times than you typically do. That's one reason why I believe you have to really know the skin to be an excellent waxer. Waxing technique is only part of it, but paying attention to the skin and noticing the different things about the skin is what's going to set you apart from other waxers for sure. The prep, the aftercare, the home care that you're recommending, and then paying attention to the skin while you're waxing, all of those things are super important. So at the end of the day, you do need to know skin in order to be a great waxer. You can see that my client has some moles on their back. Luckily, these are all flat. If your client has raised moles, you do not want to wax over them. It is possible to remove them when you wax, and then you're going to end up with lesions and blood and causing a lot of pain to your client. So make sure you're paying attention to that as well. When you have certain areas where the hair just does not want to come up, make sure you're telling your client, because sometimes there's certain areas that they're neglecting or it's just harder for them to get to. So I always let them know, hey, whenever you're exfoliating or doing this, that for your home care, pay attention to this area. This is where you have your ingrowns, or this is where you have a lot of dead skin, that kind of thing. I always want to make sure I'm educating my client as much as possible. This client says they get their partner to help them exfoliate and moisturize, but you can use an exfoliating net. Those stretch out so that you can exfoliate your back on your own, or you can use one of those body brushes that have the handle to it and get your entire back that way. Moisturizing is the more difficult part. There are some like body sprays that you can use, like hydrating mists. Those can make it easier, but you do want to moisturize your back as much as possible, especially if you're getting it waxed. Otherwise, you will get that irritation and you may even get acne. For a lot of people, the back does tend to be more resilient, so there usually isn't too many issues after a wax, but you just never know, especially if it's your first time. So be sure to take care of it the same way you would any other area that you're going to get waxed. So this client is pretty much done. I'm doing a few more cleanup strips, and sometimes I just notice like afterwards that there's a few spots that I missed in general. So you always want to make sure you're double checking. Staring at a spot too long may have you like blind to it. So sometimes take a step back and just do a double check before you're completely done. But this is me just doing some cleanup strips, and I'll let you enjoy these last few. I'm not sure why I didn't get it on camera, but you also want to moisturize afterwards. So here's the last strip. Let's take a look at the before once again and the after. Thanks for watching.